Before you all join.
Look, just start talking before it goes off again.
Yeah, go.
So good evening, everybody. It's nice to see so many faces online. So my name is Frances and I'm on the technical services team here at Teamac. And then I'm joined with...
Hi, I'm Jeff, and we've just done this once on silent, but hi, I'm Jeff. I'm director of the company, and I know quite a lot of you guys from various things and sponsorship and working together in the past. So it's a pleasure to get so many people on tonight. Nice to see you all again, seeing as it's difficult to see people these days. So let's hope we can help you tonight. I'll pass back to Frances.
Yeah, perfect. So hopefully you can all see my screen.
Yes.
Yes, that's fine. Just need to check that. So what are we going to go through this evening? So the agenda is we're just going to touch on who are Teamac, then dive straight in with surface type and preparation, looking at the marine finish options that we have, the color ranges we have available at Teamac, varnishes and oils, and then at the end we've got a live Q&A. So the presentation itself should be about 25 minutes long, and that should leave us enough time for a few questions at the end. So first of all, just one slide on who we are. So Teamac are part of Teal and Mackerel Limited. We are a family run business. We are a UK manufacturer and we're based in Hull. We've been around over 110 years. We've got 110 years of experience. We supply to over 18 countries, from Hong Kong to places in Europe. We've got everything under one roof here in Hull. So we've got our lab, factory, sales, exports, and technical services are based here as well. We offer flexibility in supply and service and bespoke solutions. So going straight in with surface type and preparation, just looking at the different substrates that we've got. So the first one is steel. So steel suffers from oxidization. This needs to be removed prior to application of any paint coating. Now, this can be done either mechanically or chemically using like a rust converter, which we'll go into on the next slide. Unpainted steel may also be covered with mill scale, which also can cause adhesion issues. So this also needs to be removed prior to the application of a coating, and that can be done by mechanical abrasion or blasting. Steel should always be degreased as well before you apply a paint coating, and it's really important that as soon as you've prepared the steel, you prime it as soon as possible to prevent it from rusting again. Then if we go on to aluminium, so aluminium, thoroughly degrease the surface the same as you would with steel. Professionally blast or mechanically abrade in order to get a really good key to that surface. If that isn't possible with aluminium, what you can actually do is use like a mordant solution or a tea wash to chemically etch that surface. And the same as steel, once you've prepared it, you need to just make sure that you prime it as soon as you can. Going on to wood, so looking at wood can be oily. So again, just like the other surfaces, it's important to degrease it. You always want to abrade in the direction of the grain with 180 to 220 grade paper. Prior to varnishing, we recommend 240 grade paper just to get a better key to that surface. Then just quickly, GRP, least amount of preparation required for this surface. You just need to make sure it's clean, abrade it with 180 to 200 grade paper, and then you can go on with like the marine gloss, for example. So that's everything on the surface preparation. What we're going to do now is just show you a short video that Jeff is going to talk through with you on the rust converter and just show you how this works, because it does save a lot of time. So bear with me 1 second. Here we go. Yeah.
So I'm one always of minimizing the work effort if you possibly can. And this is a piece of steel, and you can see I'm just pointing to the rust patches on it. I'm not going to sand it down. I'm not going to try and clean it up. I'm just using this water-based rust converter. And what this does is it chemically converts the iron oxide, the rust, into a stable form of oxide of iron. And you'll see that when I start brushing it out, it's white in color, but it reacts with the rust. And if you can see, it's starting to change color slightly. And we've got a sort of after shot where you can see the finished item. I'm brushing over all the steel. So I'm covering the clean bits and the rusty bits, but I've done no preparation at all. I'm just applying it. And a lot of people prefer to use this type of solution. And we've actually left a finished panel with this rust converter on the exposure panels on top of the factory at Hull, of course, which is a saline environment. And the panel survived for a year without any rust reforming on it. So it's a very, very effective way of removing rust. But obviously you're doing it chemically, you're not doing it physically. So you're not having to grind it. And we'll show you the other methods later. So now if you can just skip to that's what you end up with. So a rather dark looking piece of steel, which then is a perfect surface to then put the undercoat on, the primer undercoat and the top coat. So it's an easy way of preventing a problem coming back. Thanks, Francis. Do you want to pick that up?
Yeah. So then after we've looked at preparing the surface, we then go into primers. So the primers that we have in the Teamac range, the first one is the Marine Primer Undercoat. So this is a great primer and it can be used on wood, it can be used on steel, it can be used on aluminium. It's suitable for all substrates basically. It reduces top coat sinkage. It's a great all-purpose primer. It has great anti-corrosive protection too. So it has zinc phosphate within the paint, which means that it gives great corrosion protection. It's also a great product to use if you're going from, say, a red, you're wanting to go to a blue. To prevent you to have to putting so many coats of top coat on there, you could use the Marine Primer Undercoat as a barrier coat to prevent that and prevent the top coat sinking in. I've got a video on this as well. So I'm just going to put you on to Jeff again, who's going to talk you through a video showing you the Marine Primer Undercoat being applied.
Here we go. I'm doing it the hard way. So I did a lot of painting last weekend on different panels, but this is a steel panel that had some rust on it. I'm just cleaning it off. I'm using 400 grade paper on this to get it back to a nice clean, slightly roughened surface to apply the primer undercoat to. And as Francis says, this has zinc phosphate built into it. It's available in a range of tin sizes, a range of colors, and it's also good on wood. So give it a good stir. I know it's common sense. I know you guys do a lot of painting yourselves, but give it a really good stir up before you use it. Make sure everything's in the solution. And I'm giving it a good, really good stir up here. This is a gray color, which is ideal for a blue top coat. And when you apply it, it drags really nicely on the surface, which has been sanded. So it gets a good, even film. Don't put it on too thick. You're always better putting on more thin films than thick films because these products are air drying in most cases. And so therefore, the sooner the solvent leaves the paint, the harder the film will dry. And there we are. Nice primed when it's dry, ready for the top coat. Thanks, Francis.
Yeah. So that's the Marine Primer Undercoat. Then we go on to our wood primers specifically. We have two wood primers in our range. The first one is the Penetrating Wood Primer. So it's designed for above the waterline. It's especially useful for priming softwood, the Marine Primer Penetrating Wood Primer. It's designed to be used first onto bare wood, and then you would use the Marine Primer Undercoat and then the Marine Gloss on top of there to give you some added protection. It is white in colour and it's best brush applied. We have this one, the Penetrating Wood Primer, but then we have probably the more superior, stronger one of the two, which is the Aluminium Wood Primer. So the Aluminium Wood Primer is silver, it's not white. It's stain resistant primer for marine pry. It's for soft and hard woods. Again, it's designed for the top sides of the vessel, not designed for below the waterline. It can also be used in a system with the Aluminium Wood Primer, the Marine Primer Undercoat, and then you could use the Marine Gloss on top. It's best brush applied, but I've got a video next and Jeff's going to give you a little bit more detail about the Aluminium Wood Primer.
I think we better change that to grey. It's not silver.
Yeah.
But it comes out, it has got aluminium flake built into it. And the reason why this is such a strong primer is the reinforcement with aluminium within it, and it penetrates the timber and it leaves a really good surface. And the aluminium is good, particularly good on resinous timbers, which you and the old gaffers will be well familiar with. So you've got to make sure you get a good barrier that sits nicely on and in the surface. So I'm just working it in with the brush. This is just a 1/4 inch marine ply that I'm applying it to for simplicity, but there's a nice drag on the primer over the sanded surface and it flows out well. And there you've got, it's great on decks, really presents the best surface. So the penetrating wood primer is good, but the aluminium wood primer is the one we always try and recommend to people. It's a bit more money, but it's much better value for money, I think.
Yeah, perfect. So moving on, so there are single pack primers, and then we go on to a 2-pack primer called Marine Primer Undercoat. So High Performance Marine Primer Undercoat is a 2-pack zinc phosphate coating. So this can actually go below the waterline and on the top sides as well. It offers our highest level of corrosion resistance, but although it's got corrosion resistance on there, it can still be used on wood. So it can be used on wood as a primer, and then you could use the high performance marine gloss on top of it for the best system to give you the nicest finish. So it's really can be applied to all substrates, and it's best brush or roller applied. We've got a video on this as well, so the high performance marine primer undercoat, and Jeff is just going to go through it in a little bit more detail with you.
I can show you what I did. Yeah. So here we go, 2 parts, A and B. The activator is the clear one, which I'm opening now, the part full tin, and then you've got the base, which in this case is red. Now, when you mix these, a lot of people just tip the activator into the base and then stir. What I'm doing here is make sure you stir the base up, because these are chemically curing products. So A reacts with B and chemically cures it, rather than, it dries also with solvent leaving, but that's the reason why the performance is so strong. So you've got to make sure you get a good dispersion of the product. So give it a good stir, and you can use, and we would recommend using a paint paddle, which I think I'm going to produce now in a slow speed drill if you're using a bigger tin. I didn't want to have the whole lot flying all over the place, honestly, so I've stirred it manually really well. Add the activator to it, keep stirring till you've got a nice even dispersion of paint. Then again, I'm applying this to the marine ply. It's a bit more sticky than the aluminium wood primer, a little bit more sticky, but it flows out still well and provides a really good film, a really good finished film. Brushes out much like a single pack actually. And again, see, I'm working it into the grains, so you make sure you get good adhesion and it flows out, and you end up with a really hard red panel of timber. And you can see I'm going to lay it off a little bit now, and then don't touch it. It's really tempting with paintwork to touch it if you find some dust that's blown onto it as you've been painting it, but just leave it, because you can take it out. If you put your finger on it, you end up marking. I've done that so many times as well, so I can't believe I'm telling you not to. But anyway, Francis, carry on.
Yeah, so that's the high performance marine primer undercoat. So then we're going on to the top coats. So our most popular product is the marine gloss. So our marine gloss can be applied to all suitably primed substrates. So if you were using this with wood, you'd want to be using the aluminium wood primer, and then you could use the marine gloss. Or if you wanted to add some extra protection, or if you were going for quite a high color change from the gray, you could use the marine primer undercoat and then the marine gloss. So the marine gloss has a really high glossy finish. We probably recommend 2 or maybe even 3 coats of the marine gloss to get a really nice finish on there. It is durable protection against the elements. It's going to offer you UV protection. It comes in 48 standard colors. So you've got a large range, but it can also be tinted as well. So RAL and British standard colors, we can tint the marine gloss 1 litre plus of those colors. It can be brush, roller, or even airless spray applied, this one. And Jeff has got another video he's going to talk you through of the marine gloss being applied on top of the marine primer undercoat, I think. Oh no, the aluminium wood primer, that.
So here's the aluminium wood primer. It's got a few nibs on it. So I'm just going to use 240 grade paper to take that back. You could go 300 actually, but just to take off any of the nibs. I'm only putting 1 coat of aluminium wood primer on this panel. Sometimes we recommend 2 coats of primer, 1 coat of color changing undercoat, and then maybe 2 or 3 coats of gloss. I've chosen, I think it's Arctic blue. We fill the tins very full at Teamac, don't we? That's what I found out. I shall have to look at that and reduce the quantities. We're giving paint away. That's what I said to them today. Anyway, this now brushes out really nicely on that aluminium wood primer because the primer gets hold of the paint on the brush. It doesn't run, it flows out really well. So you do have to work quite hard to get it on, but it's sticking really well and adhering to the substrate. And you can see that there's no, it's quite straightforward. There's no gaps in the lines. There's no sissing or variation in it. So I was really pleased with the way it went on. And you can finish it with a nice blue panel. I'm wearing some gloves, thank heavens. And here we go. And there you end up with a nice, not finished. We've only put 1 primer and 1 top coat on this, but it's purely for the demonstration purpose. And there you can see how the panel looks.
Yep, perfect. So we've got the marine gloss, and then we have, just like the high performance primer, we have the high performance marine gloss. So the high performance marine gloss is actually a 2-pack polyurethane top coat. This is going to give you the most abrasion resistant, scratch protection. It's got really high UV protection. It's going to give you a 5-star glossy finish, this one. It's the most durable Teamac top coat, the P101 high performance marine gloss. It is suitable for both the above the waterline, so the top size, and also below the waterline as well. So if you didn't want to use an anti-fouling for whatever reason, then you could use the P101 high performance marine gloss below the waterline. It's best brush or roller applied, this one. And we've got a video just showing it being applied, so you can see the difference between the marine gloss and the high performance marine gloss.
Let's have a look.
Yeah. Going to go on it now.
Again, this is available in a full range of colors.
Oh yeah, it's available in exactly the same colors as the marine gloss, the high performance marine gloss is.
So again, you've got two components. There's the base with the color in it, and again I'm going to stir that thoroughly before I put the activator in. You have to bear in mind these products have pot lives, which means they will cure and they're usable for several hours, but once they've started to go off, they're not usable anymore. So add all the activator. Again, you could use a slow speed paddle in there as well. Mix it thoroughly, get a good dispersion. I wave the paddle at you again to show you that's the sort of thing that we could use. This is the primer that we put on previously. Do the same thing again. I mean, it's the same process. Denib it and make sure you take any dust that's produced off that panel and then apply the top coat. It brushes out in a very similar way to the single pack marine gloss. But this is a much harder product and it flows out quite nicely. The primer, again, because it's well prepped, is actually getting hold of the brush and pulling the paint onto the surface. So it doesn't run, flows out well. And I'm working it over there now, just laying it off a bit as I go. And as I said, there's a full range of colors available, and there's plenty of different, I think there's 2 or 3 different tin sizes too, which gives you a lot of flexibility in how much you need. Because obviously when you've mixed it, you should use it all or else it has to be wasted. So here we go, brushing out the last bits now. I think that's Regatta Blue that I'm using here, which I think is a great color, but it's flowed out really well and gives you that. I'm just laying it off again. When I've done this one more time, then that's it. Don't touch it, Jeff. Leave it alone, I should tell myself. But basically, that's it. It's finished. Let it cure. Any dust or anything drops into it, don't try and move it until it's dry.
So yeah, just going to quickly talk about these ones. So we have our high performance marine gloss and we have our marine gloss that are both glossy finishes, but then we also do our marine gloss, a single pack marine gloss in a satin finish. We do it in black and red. It can be applied to all of the same substrates as the marine gloss. It has all the same protection as the marine gloss. It's just going to give you a lower reflection, so like an eggshell satin finish. But it's still going to protect you against the elements. It's just if you would rather have that sort of finish. Now, we only do this one in black and red, but we also do a matting agent here at Teamac. So if you ever needed the marine gloss to be matted down, you can purchase the matting agent. You add some of the matting agent to the marine gloss and you matte it down accordingly to how matte you would like it. So if you want a 20% reduction in sheen level, then you can achieve that with the matting agent in any of the colors. It's just designed to be used with the marine gloss though, not the P101 high performance marine gloss. Now Jeff's going to talk you through the varnishes now, and we've got some videos on these as well. So we're going to dive straight in with the Teamac yacht and seaplane varnish.
This is a traditional long oil single pack yacht varnish with UV barriers in it. So it's one of our best selling products and many people have used it. I'm sanding down the timber as you would 240 grade paper, just taking off the rough edges. Make sure you get the dust off. This is the varnish. It's the purest form of paint actually, varnish, because there's no additives in it. For a start, there's no pigment in it. So it's all resin and binder with a bit of thinners, but it's air drying, so the thinners have to leave it to dry. You've got to give it a stir, even so, because you want to make sure everything is dispersed, and then it applies direct to the timber. You could thin the first coat, you could thin it slightly. I think we recommend sometimes doing that just to help the penetration, but it's pretty good in its own way. Brushes out nicely, changes the color, darkens it down. The more layers you put on, obviously it'll get darker. But again, the surface gets hold of the paint really well and you end up with a nice finish. Lay it off and then let it dry. So I'm just finishing the laying off process now, and I'm sure you guys do this anyway, but it's really important to get that right and then leave it. Don't go back over it again. So well, why am I going back over it? I must have been keen, but there we go. That's it. That is the varnish, one coat straight on. Now then, we've got a 2-pack varnish, which is based on the same resin system as the high performance marine finish, except it doesn't have the pigmentation in it. It's water white. I've got to go through the same process again, sanding down. And generally speaking, 2-packs and single pack products, if you've got 2-packs on there, stick to them. If you've got single pack on there, stick to those, or you have to take them off. Because you can get a reaction between a 2-pack product and a single pack product. So I'm sanding the timber down, sanding the marine ply, get all the loose bits again, dust it off carefully, and then we come to the varnish. If you want to, I think people have seen this mixing process. I'm doing the same thing again. You jump it forward a bit.
Yeah.
There you are. You can see it's actually even clearer in color than the single pack product. It's even clearer. It flows out nicely. It applies in the same way. It's got quite a strong smell to this, so you need to have good ventilation when you're applying it. I actually quite like the smell, but that worries me. I must have been in paint too long. Anyway, you brush it on, work it into the grains, and there we have the finished panel. Again, it's the same process, laying it off. Make sure you've got a nice film over there. Don't apply too thickly. As I said before, multiple thin coats are far better. That's what you end up with. And there is a panel, I think we put them both together. You can just see the top panel is the traditional varnish, which is slightly darker in color. Okay, thanks, Francis. What are we on now?
Oils.
Teak oils. This is my bit, or silicon oils. There was a question about varnishes against oils, so we'll just talk initially about the different forms of oil. So siliconized teak oil, this is one that is based on linseed oil, raw linseed oil with white spirit, and it's got some UV protection in it. It's glossier than a Danish oil would be, And you need to give more coats of siliconized teak oil to give the same protection as the Danish oil. More solvent, so there's a bit more smell. So again, it's outside use, and I would generally recommend this as an outside product. But it's a first-class treatment for teak and hardwood timbers, and I'll come on to the differences between them in a minute. Danish oil is a blend with tung oil. Danish oil there's more oil in there, less solvent, a bit of dryers, and a bit of resin reinforcement as well. So this is the Danish oil is more expensive. It's generally flatter than the teak oil, and you don't need as many coats to give you the protection. There's less solvent, so less smell, and you can use this. A lot of people do kitchen sides with Danish oil, but it's generally a stronger oil, and we can supply that through the agricultural range where we sell quite a lot of it. If we just go on to look at the comparison, so varnish or oil, well, this in one way is an incredibly easy question to answer, but for the old gaffers and a lot of wooden vessels, it's incredibly difficult because oils obviously are not as waterproof as a sealed surface that the varnish provides. The varnish will sit and provide you with a gloss top coat, which the water will not penetrate, or not much water will penetrate, whereas oils will allow some water in. However, a varnish is also a film of paint. It's a film of resin that's bound together. And no matter how long the oil you put in that varnish, the timber is going to move. So the more flexible the timber is that you're applying it to, the more liable it is to crack, or it could crack and break. So it's a balance. I mean, oils will not seal the surface as well and have to be applied regularly. Oils will not crack. There's no film. Oils are relatively inexpensive. Oils involve less preparation. You still have to prepare the surface, but there's not quite as much work to do. But varnish will resist water and UV better in most cases. Again, I'm talking about our sort of product ranges. Varnish is less flexible. A dried film is formed. The protection is good, but the more coats of varnish you put on, then ultimately, the more solid the film becomes. So you've got a lot of protection, but it can become brittle. So a lot of people have actually sort of used maybe 2 or 3 coats of a teak oil and let it dry for 2 or 3 days, and then just put 1 coat of varnish onto it to give it some more protection. But obviously varnish, when you use that, is more difficult to repair. So once you put a varnish coat on, you have to take it on because otherwise you can't oil it anymore. So it's a balance, really. I mean, if you've got a water-facing surface, I would always go with varnishes. If you've got something that's not directly water-facing, then you can, by all means, you can use oils or varnishes. And they both present different finishes. And I mean, you know, we've done work with all kinds of different vessels on sealing up hard woods with varnish, which quite frankly you cannot do effectively because there's so much resin in a lot of it that it just comes out. I never forget Sunseeker having tables blistering. We tried to solve that with a varnish, and you just can't do it. You have to let the wood breathe. So what's the next slide? So okay, so I'm sure people have questions about that by all means afterwards, but I'll shut up because I know the time's running on a bit. And
yeah, so the last product that we're just going to look at is Peel Away. So Peel Away is a paint stripper for anti-fouling removal, but it's not just for anti-fouling. It can actually be used to remove other paints from the surface as well, and it prevents damage to the substrate underneath. So it is environmentally friendly and it saves time. That is the main thing. And I've got a video actually just to show you quickly how the Peel Away actually works. So let's get the video up and I'll just talk you through. In fact, Jeff's going to talk you through this video.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
You'll talk you through the video.
That's not it. Right, here we go. Sorry about that. It's basically a paint remover with a plastic bandage that you put on top. And with the pressure on getting control of emissions and waste at the moment, we're trying to control the release of the anti-fouling and make sure there's no mess. So this is a marvelous way of having somebody working for you on your boat when you're not even there. Because if you apply the paste and the sealing sheet on it, you can leave it for, it says 6 hours dwell time. When you come back, it takes all of it off. And then you've got a blanket containing most of the product you're removing, and it can be disposed of in the normal way. So it's not just applicable to anti-fouling. You can use it on all substrates. So we thought we'd raise that as a possible something to think about for future reference, because it's been a very effective product, and you can see how easy the paint comes off. We do have sample pots for people to try as well. So
yeah, I do.
Okay, thank you.
So just the last slide, which we can show at the end. If you ever need this information, then we can get it to you. But technical support. So we have a technical support team, which I am on. And if you ever need any help or advice on colours or application or products for Teamac, you can give us a call and speak to someone on technical. We also have area sales managers that are local to you as well. And then we have our stockists, and if anyone wants a colour card or product advice and booklets, then let us know and we'll sort that out for you too.
Can I just add something to that?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was just going to add that, as Francis said at the beginning, we have labs, technical development, manufacturing. It's all actually on one site in a group of about 60 or 70 people. So, if we can't we can't provide the information straight away, we'll always try and help get the answers from the lab, who can make bespoke colours and products if that's required. So we like to hope that we can well, we enjoy working with you guys. So let's hope we get some. Hope I get some easy questions.
Because we're such a small team as well, it's easy for just walk over to the lab and ask some questions or pick up the phone. So we're always happy to help. So now we have some questions. These are questions that had already been put in. So, right. And then there's going to be some room for some questions as well at the end, I think.
So this was Paul. I can't see Paul, but I hope I'm going to answer. Thanks for the question, Paul, about Sure Grip. And it says that you sanded and cleaned and wiped down with acetone and patches don't stick. Well, can I just ask, what is the deck now? What's on the deck now? I mean, is it just open timber, or has there been something else on it before? Has it been oiled or anything?
Is Paul on?
Maybe not. Okay,
no, I don't think he's here.
Okay, well, it's still a good question. What I would do is I would sand back the area. I would sand back. You see, if the Sure Grip's gone straight onto the wood, if it's an oily timber, then you really need to use something like aluminium wood primer underneath it. I'm not so sure. I wouldn't use acetone. I don't think I'd use something slightly milder that's compatible with the product, like white spirit, if you wanted to degrease the surface, and make sure that that's dried out, because the products are solvent drying, so you don't want to leave too much residual solvent in the substrate, in the timber. So I would take back the flaking areas. I would sand them back. I would probably prime it with aluminium wood primer, and then I'd reapply the Sure Grip onto that. And the aluminium wood primer will provide a barrier from what's in the deck underneath. As long as it's not water, as long as it's dry, then that should solve the problem. So you're not really doing anything wrong. It's just one of those difficult, if you've got contamination in there, it's about controlling that. And that's why the aluminium wood primer is such a good product. This is an interesting question from Andy. Is Andy on? Andy Conroy. Well, anti-fouling that actually work in heavy fouling areas. Ours works. I don't know which product of ours that Andy used, but we do a number of different ones, and I would suggest that Teamac D-type is probably the best product to use under those circumstances. But I think that if I read rightly, the boat was going up and down on a muddy mooring, and I suspect that some of the mud might have affected the anti-fouling. It is suitable for high and dry moorings, but you've just got, in some cases, if some of the anti-fouling suffers from abrasion from the mud, it is actually an ablative product, so it isn't a hard film, so that can affect it. But obviously fouling seasons vary from one to the next depending on the temperature of the water and what's going on in the water, and that always actually changes. So we have to be as general purpose as we possibly can be with it. But I hope that answers. It says Teamac Precision, and I'm just not sure which product. Protector is a good entry point product that a lot of people use, and some people are very happy with that. And then there's Teamac D-type, which is about twice the price and about twice the performance. You can get a couple of years service out of that. And Teamac A-type, which is based on a different active with a booster, but that's also applicable to aluminium as well as wood and steel. And you can get a really nice white one as well, because it's copper thiocyanate, not copper oxide. And copper oxide is a reddish color, and thiocyanate is white, so you can get a really nice white color with that one. what's the next screen then?
Can you reduce the amount of grit, perhaps
Yeah.
less stringing, painting over
Stirring.
stirring?
Yeah. Okay,
Painting,
well, yeah, I've got it.
You got it?
Well, the stirring, I mean, Sure Grip is a strong product and it's been out there for a long time. It is quite coarse because it is designed to be very safe, but it is quite hard on your feet. And so some people, you can put a coat of a satin finish or a slightly matted down gloss on top of it. You've got to brush it out well because with the grit and rough appearance, it's easy to put on too thick a coat of paint. But if you brush it out properly, that will reduce the prominence of the grit. Or what you could do is, Danielle will probably wonder what I'm talking about now, but we do an anti-slip option, which can be added or could be added to a marine gloss, which is far less aggressive on your feet. But again, Sure Grip is what it says. It's Sure Grip. So it's designed to stop you falling over. So yes, you can put another coat on top. I suggest that you flatten that coat down, brush it well out, and it will make it more mild. Is it okay to mix top coat and undercoat to get a less shiny black finish? Well, I think you can do, but I think the answer there is mix the matting agent, and the instructions are on the side of the tin in terms of the percentages that you need to use. So I think it comes in a 500, is it a 500 ml tin or a litre tin?
500 ml tin. If you added, I think if you added 500 ml of matting agent to 500 ml of gloss, it would give you a completely matte finish. So it's that sort of ratio, but the instructions are on the tin and also on the technical data sheet, which you can get online at Teamac's website. So the technical data sheet for the matting agent is on there too.
And repairing drapes and scratches to the hull, 2-pack surfaces. Two-packs are great, aren't they? I mean, they're probably expensive, but when they go right, they're great. But if you do, I mean, I painted the deck of a wooden sports boat, and I think it was as though somebody had sent just after I drove away from it uncovered, somebody sent a black cloud over and it just rained on the deck of my recently painted boat, which I spun around on the M4 and went back to try to get back to it. And it cured, and the paint is really hard and difficult to take back. It's fantastic stuff. It demonstrated how hard wearing it is, but if you get a scratch and a ding in it, you do have to put some work in, but you can repair it. You can repair it. You've got to try and sand it back and feather the edges as much as possible. Then obviously, if you've got a small patch, you then have to get the smallest tin of 2-pack product that you can and try and feather that in and sand it back again, and then put another coat on and gradually build it up. And when you get to the end, you can polish it up and try and blend it in as much as possible. If it's sort of the transom that's damaged, then you do the whole transom again. So it's better to do it in sections. If it's clinker built, then do a whole plank so that it doesn't, because it's difficult to get it to look exactly like the other ones are. Well, it is with any surface, but even more so with a 2-pack. But you do have to go back and feather the edges because it'll leave quite sharp edges on it. Working on tiled varnish surfaces. Great question. Yeah, I mean, how tired is the varnish? If it's flaking off, then really it needs to come off completely. But if it's still intact and it's chalked over time, or it's the UV, I mean, UV is incredible, isn't it? It breaks everything down eventually. If you see a vessel that's one side's been exposed to more light than the other, the color's different. It affects everything over time. So if it's just lost its luster, then you can, and it's a 1-pack varnish. Actually, you could do the same with a 2-pack. You can sand it back carefully with probably, I'd go for the 240 grade paper again, so that you put energy into the surface. Because paint will adhere with 2 forces. It'll adhere with a chemical force of the molecules bonding together. You're not going to get too much of that on a product that's been down there for a long time. But you can put some energy back into it again by sanding it. And the paint shrinkage, as the paint dries, it will shrink as the solvent leaves it. As it shrinks, it gets hold of the surface underneath. So if you've got a profile, a roughish profile on the surface, as it dries, it really gets hold of the surface underneath. So as long as you can get back to a varnish surface that you're happy with and is consistent and even across the whole area, then you can reapply and refresh it. If it's flaking off and delaminating all over, then really chances are it's going to delaminate all over the place. So it probably has to come back off. I mean, I suppose you could use peel away to take it off. The pros and cons of using epoxy between wood and varnish, I presume this is two-pack varnishes. Well, epoxy, we're not experts on sort of these types of epoxy systems. I mean, I know West do a great system, but I know that the epoxy systems seem to work really well. They have to be UV barriered because the epoxy linkage is vulnerable to UV, so they have to put UV barriers in there. But it depends what you want to end up with. I mean, you could probably talk to me about this. I mean, if you want a wooden boat with a varnish on it, or if you're trying to sheathe the whole vessel in an epoxy resin system, that's definitely going to protect it, and it's definitely going to stop water getting into it. But you only got to let the timber breathe. So look, they work really well, I'm sure, but I've never been a massive fan, but I'm not an expert either, so I probably shouldn't really try and answer it. Two-pack varnishes will go on top of the epoxy system. One-pack varnishes, you might have adhesion problems unless you really open it up and sand it back. So if you put an epoxy sheath on the vessel, then sorry, okay, I'll stop going on.
Just conscious of time.
And treating teak, I think oil treatment or leave it to weather. That's another great question. I've got a bench in the garden which came off HMS Valiant, and that teak bench will be what, 50, 60 years old now, and I don't think I've ever oiled it, but it does actually look like that. It does look a bit moldy and manky, but it's still got its integral strength, so it's remarkable how strong teak is. But I would always oil it and try and keep on top of it, because if you let the mold get in, again, that's where a varnish is probably as strong, because it prevents that happening. You've got to get the mold out, so you can't oil on top of that. Sorry, I've probably gone on too long.
No,
anyway, look.
I'm just conscious if anyone has any other questions.
Sorry, right. Oh, shut up. Anybody got any questions then? Yeah.
We've answered my 2 questions, so I'm very pleased about that.
Frank, you're on mute.
I can see Frank's trying to talk.
Okay, right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, right. Excellent. Right. Now, one or two things that you've been talking about. I've got a wooden clinker built boat, yeah, and I've had some quite experience of wooden boats, yeah. One of the things, yeah, that you can really do, yeah, before you were talking about mold and things, is you make up a solution, yeah, of copper sulfate, yeah, and you use a garden sprayer, sort of a gallon job,
yeah,
and do it on a really, really hot day, yeah, right? So if you spray the whole boat all over the place with the copper sulfate, by capillary action, yeah, the copper sulfate will get sucked into all the crevices, yeah,
yeah,
and then the hot weather will take off the solvent, which is water, yeah, and it'll leave the copper sulfate behind, yeah, and that, yeah, provides a really good deterrent, if you want nothing else, for mold building and things like that. And then if you put varnish on top of it, you seal the copper sulfate into all the nooks and crannies, yeah, and trust me, it works, yeah. Thank you very much.
That's if it works well, Frank, that's a good tip. I mean, I've not heard of that being done before, but the copper sulfate, certainly they won't like that. So if you can build it into the system, then I'm sure it works. That's great. No, thanks for that. Thank you.
The other thing, again, yeah, if you want to start with a lot of GRP boats, a decent solution of sodium hypochlorite, yeah, which is bleach, yeah, also works a treat with cleaning, yeah. But when you buy bleach, yeah, in a container, yeah, only 2.5%, yeah, is sodium hypochlorite, the active ingredient, yeah. So you're effectively paying for water, yeah. But if you go to an agricultural store and buy, well, you've got to usually buy a 25-litre drum, yeah, which is what they use for cleaning byres and things. But if you make a strong solution of sodium hypochlorite, yeah, about 30%, yeah. And if you spray that all over a GRP boat, yeah, and leave that for a bit, and then give it a jolly good scrub, yeah, then you've got a really good clean surface, yeah, to start doing things on top of that. Thank you.
Well, that's an interesting. Hypochlorite, of course, is a very, very strong sterilizing agent. They use very mild doses of it in swimming pools. And the only thing is, you've got to make sure you don't leave any of that underneath the paint with that one. But I'm sure it kills and cleans everything really well. But I'd be a bit more nervous about that, I think. I mean, I think, but yeah, if that works, then fine. You just have to make sure you don't leave any of it on, because it'll contaminate the paint film when it goes onto the substrate, I think.
Right, but a good freshwater wash. But the thing is that it gets underneath underneath all the fittings, yeah, because that's where it all builds up, yeah. Because on my boat, I've lifted all the fittings, and the other thing again in a wooden boat is if you use tallow,
yes,
right, heat the tallow up and then just brush that onto the wood before you put the fitting back on again, which makes sure that the seawater doesn't get in. The big killer for wooden boats, actually, believe it or not, is fresh water. Yeah.
What question?
Built base. I've got a question here from.
We've got some questions
Colin.
here. Paul's got a question. We've got
Sorry.
some questions.
I've got a question. Yeah.
Oh.
A little bit more on that rust converter. What about underwater fittings, where you've got, you know, for instance, rudder fittings and that sort of thing?
Absolutely fine under the water, because once it's cured, it's stable. So you would put it on. In fact, a lot of people do wire brush and sand the steel down, and then apply the rust converter, and then apply the primer to that. So it's perfectly suitable. You can use it underneath the water as well, as long as it's, you know, cured and dried. And that panel I showed you had some slight white streaks left in it. It wasn't fully dry and reacted. You need to make sure it's absolutely gone. It's black, and then it's, as I say, we put a panel on exposure test in a salty environment, and for a year, the only thing that went slightly were the edges of the steel. So yes, under the waterline, it's just as effective. It's fine for that use.
Thank you.
And I've got
we've got a question from Colin that says, what is the advantage of the 2-pack primer versus the single pack?
Well, they're chemically curing, they're stronger, they generally last longer, you can get thicker film bills with them quicker, and they're more resilient, basically, as are the top coats. But with all these things, you see, I'm always slightly, you need a good substrate to put it onto, and you can use 2-pack primers on wood, and people do, and they're fine. But if you get it marked or indented, then you've got more of a problem of putting it right than you have with a conventional type product, the long oil marine glosses and top coats. Excuse me, sorry. So the advantage of it is that it's stronger. So in the best conditions, if you get a boat that's in good shape, you've got good conditions to apply it, then you can get a really long-lasting result with a 2-pack system. They do cost about twice the price, but they do give a lot more performance. Yeah, they do. So I hope is that all right, Colin? Is that answer?
Peter's got a question as well, I think. You got your hand up there.
Yeah, sorry. Steve, can I ask you about bilge paint? What are its special properties, and are they more than just being oil resistant?
Well, the bilge paint that we supply now has a little bit of chlorinated rubber built into it. So it's based on a machinery enamel formulation, actually. So it's quite flexible. It's reasonably water resistant with it, and it's quite strongly chemical and oil resistant. So you get a good film bill from it, and you know, the bilges generally have a slurry of all sorts of things in them. So the chlorinated rubber that's built into that paint gives it that extra resistance. It's a shorter oil than the marine gloss, so it's quicker drying. So it's not so good. Well, obviously, it's not as good against UV as the topside glosses. But I've known people who've painted their bilges with marine gloss as well, actually, and they seem to have been happy with it. But the bilge paint is specifically designed for that purpose. So does that answer? Is that okay? Does that answer the
well, the reason I'm asking is that our boat doesn't have an engine, so we don't have any requirement for oil resistance. But I was just wondering if there were other properties that we could benefit from?
Well, it's oil and chemical properties from the chlorinated rubber that distinguish it from the other products. If you've got no contaminants in there, but then I would still recommend you use it because it's going to dry better. And particularly as you're not going to get much ventilation down there, are you? So when you put it on, marine glosses being a long while will take longer to dry and there'll probably be more solvent there, whereas this is less. So it'll be less smelly, it'll dry better, it'll dry to a gloss finish. So I would still advocate using that product in that area, just in case.
Right, thank you.
Neil's got a question as well. I think he's got his hand up there.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
You're speaking to me?
Yes,
Yes, hi,
yes,
Neil.
hi Neil.
Yeah. The High Performance Marine Primer is a 2-pack. Will that go on top of existing 1-pack stuff?
No.
Thank you.
You could have a problem with that, Neil, because the solvents in the 2-pack products are generally very strong. Although they dry and that solvent leaves the product, the solvent might soften the coating underneath. It depends how long it's been on for, but more to the point and more problematic is that when the 2-pack product dries, the adhesion it provides and the shrinkage in the film as it gets hold of the surface underneath. If your single pack product hasn't softened from the solvent, then it sure as heck might get pulled off as the top coat dries and contracts on it. And it can, rather like I can't show you because if you put your hand on the table with it's sort of like putting a hand on a piece of paper and contracting your hand on the piece of paper, and it pulls the paper away from the surface. There's a danger that happens with the 2-pack products. So look, you can get, some people have told me, oh, I've done that for years, I've never had a problem. And it always amazes me how tolerant some of these products can be. But if you were talking to Neil Lursley, the lab manager, he would frown wildly at what I've just said. But I think you'd probably find the solvents are stronger so they can soften the previous coat, and the adhesion is very strong so it might pull the previous coat off. So that's the
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I thought that might be the answer, but we can always hope.
Well, the problem is what a lot of people want to do is they want to put 2-pack systems inside certain areas of the boat so they don't have to paint them so often, but they've got single pack systems in there and it's a risk. So
thanks, Gordon. We still got Neil, I think, with his hand up.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Fine, yeah.
I'm just curious on the ratio of the 2-pack. I can see you slopping it all in using a complete litre or whatever, but I'm used to mixing mine up in bean cans and being a bit conservative with it. Is it 5-to-1 or something like that?
We have it in weights. If you did want the mixing ratios of it's not something that we just give out, because if it's not done correctly, if we had it on a technical data sheet,
Neil obviously does it like that,
so
you'd be fine.
But if you ring us up at Teamac Technical, we can give you the weights of the products.
Well, we'll send them, Neil. If you give us an email address, we'll send them through. And you're quite right. I mean, those measures are filled out by weight very accurately on the filling line. So I know that if I say very accurately, obviously there's some tiny bit left in the bottom of the activated tin when you tip it in. But so there is some tolerance in there. But basically, you add all of one to the other and you've got the right mix. So if you wanted to break it down to smaller units, we could give you those mixing ratios by weight, so you could do that. So that would be okay.
Yeah, okay.
I hope that helps.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Got Alan Sibley with his hand up.
Thank you. I'll confess to being a real beginner to caring for a small wooden boat, which I've recently acquired. I want to repaint the lower half, which is moment black gloss, because I'm getting a little too much water seepage between the planks. Do you recommend that I should take the existing paint right back to the? Do I need to go back to bare wood before I start applying, your products to give myself a better seal and and a durable under the water part of the hull?
Well, the first thing, unfortunately, is the paint won't bridge gaps. So if it's a clinker built, if it's got gaps.
It's not clinker built, but it's sort of large planks. I wouldn't call it clinker built. I'm not exactly sure what it's constructed of. I don't
Well,
think it's ply.
Well, the paint will obviously protect the surface from any water penetration, but depending on how big the gaps are between the planks, you know, you need to use a proper marine filler to make sure that those. So, if you're really going to go back to basics, I would strip it back. I would have a really good. Also, wood when you put it in the water, as all you guys know. I mean, it'll swell up. I mean, I watched them launch a boat at Flamborough, and of course, you know, they just restored it, and they put a couple of huge bilge pumps in, banged it in the water, and watched it all mature like a carrot in the water as it looked like it was going to sink, and then it came to the surface as the plank swelled and filled again. I would take it back and check all the planking, use a sealer, use a filler, proper marine quality filler as appropriate. And then when you're in that position, you've got a choice. You can either give it a 2-pack solution or a single-pack solution. At the moment, you don't know what the black gloss is that's on it. It isn't bitumen.
No, I don't know, because I didn't put it on, no. Okay, thanks, that's useful. I
think I wouldn't try and, if you're not sure what it is and you want to get it right, I wouldn't compromise on.
Could it be bitumen that's on there?
Yeah, if anybody's got bitumen on it, and that's more for inland waterways, but we've had a lot of people who've got bitumen all over the hull, and it's fine, but to me, it's the bottom end of the food chain. It's great for certain things, but once you've used bitumen, you cannot overcoat with anything without taking it off. So you're trapped into that cycle, and you know, so it's a problem. But I would take it back. I would inspect the planking. If you're not certain, get someone in, you know, to look at it and get the marine filler in there, and then you've got a perfect hull. You can then apply a couple of coats of 2-pack high performance primer and a couple of coats of 2-pack high performance gloss. That should give you a really good long lasting solution.
Thank you.
And then we also have, do we have anyone else? We've got another question here. We rarely get to choose the ambient temperature and wind strength when we want to apply paint and varnish. Do we need to do anything different in weather extremes to get a good finish? That's from Colin as well.
Well, that's a good question. I wish I could control that. I know we got soaked at the weekend doing those panels. I had to move into the workshop and stood on one on the way in. So, but you know, that's, so you haven't seen that film. But the I mean, what you're asking for, can you accelerate the drying, or can you do something to help it? I mean, look, condensation. Some people, if you can't control the ambient temperature, some people try and put a tent over their boat and paint it under that, and that's fine as long as you get good ventilation, because they're prone to condensation. Do you do anything differently? I would. You're going to have heard all this before, I'm sure. I mean, I would not paint before sort of in many months of the year before 10 o'clock in the morning, and I would make sure before anything starts happening in the evening I've finished. I sometimes use one of these, if you can see that, like a moisture meter. So if you stick the 2 prongs into the substrate, it'll give you a moisture reading on the screen, and you can work out what the percentage of water is in the substrate but not in the atmosphere. So you can guess whether you've got too much water around or not, or you can get a moisture meter reader. But you really don't want, you've just got to pick the day and try and get as much ventilation and temperature in as possible. So if I was to tender a boat, I would make sure that I try to keep the ends open, and I even put a fan in there to keep the airflow good. And I would watch for condensation early and late. In terms of an accelerator to make it go quicker, we do some epoxies that cure as low as -5, but they've got a pot life of about 10 seconds, and they use them on freezer room floors and that sort of thing when they can't close a freezer down. But they're very expensive and pretty precarious products. So look, I can't offer you any advice other than move to another country. No, I'm sorry. It's difficult. Well, I would probably tent it. I'd probably put something over the top and try and get a good airflow through, and at least then you'd know there was no water dropping onto the vessel under any circumstances. And you know, if you're using a 2-pack and it gets affected by rain, I mean, I did have a slide in here on paint faults, which seems to have mysteriously disappeared, Danielle. So obviously you didn't want me to talk about that, but there's something called bloom. Which, bloom, I think you've got, when bloom is when a paint cures, you get a white shadow appearance in the gloss, and it's really easy to overcome, but that is moisture getting trapped, because some people will paint at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. If they get a cold evening, the condensation enters the paint film before it's cured, and it turns it white opaque color, and that's classic bloom, and that's one of the things that our atmosphere tends to do for us. So sorry.
And just
another thing that I do, which might be a bit naughty sometimes, is if you can sleep on board, yeah, the night before, yeah, get yourself a 2 kilowatt heater, yeah, and open the forward hatch, yeah, and just give it a jolly good heating, yeah, all through the night, yeah, and then when you get up in the morning, yeah, you'll find the right time, yeah, when you want to do the topside painting, and that makes a big difference, yeah.
I would agree completely. If you get that temperature up, then it makes a massive difference, and it is just the nature of the weather. I mean, I've watched people paint boats with big tents. I mean, you probably remember Dan Houston, the editor of Classic Boat. I mean, his boat Nereus was painted with our material, and that was done in a tent, and I was really nervous about it, but the guy who did it did a fantastic job. He kept good ventilation, and it looked like a mirror finish in it, and they kept that reasonably warm as they did it. So it just wants to be above 10 degrees. I mean, you know, you want to be at least 10, and that's during and after application. You know,
if you can heat the boat, yeah, overnight, yeah, and then just put a tent over the bit that you're going to paint, yeah, it makes a real big difference, that, because you've got the airflow and you've got the warmth, yeah, and if that doesn't, you know, that's all the right conditions, yeah. Over.
Okay,
we've got another question here, saying that, is it Jeremy has said that he's always believed that 2-pack is less flexible than a single pack, and if Alan's boat has planks that are moving relative to each other, shouldn't he stick with a single pack?
That's a good point. It's a good point. And yeah, okay, 2-packs are very hard and resilient, but as long as you keep the coats, the number of coats down, you don't try and put, a lot of people put too many coats of paint on full stop. They put 10 or 11 coats on and it gets very brittle. But it's a good point. Yeah, 2-packs are harder, but as long as you've got the perfect conditions to put them in, and it's hard wood that it's made of, then you should be okay. If it's not, and it's softer and it's bending, then obviously you could have a problem with that. But under those circumstances, I would still put 2 coats of 2-pack and 2 coats of top coat on that vessel, as long as it's properly sealed up after that. So, but it's a good point. They are very, very hard products, these 2-packs, but they do last a long time. So as long as you get the right film thicknesses on, you should be fine.
Is there any more questions?
I don't have a question, but I can add to the bilge paint that we still do red, which in the bilge paint, which is quite a popular colour, but it was discontinued by others. But we still have the red. That might be an advantage
to using it.
No, well, we've actually used white. It looks very nice.
Right, okay. Well, we've got that as well.
Well, it was your white bilge paint that we used, so yeah. It looked very nice when we put it on, but after the floors had rusted a little bit, it wasn't quite so pristine.
Yeah.
White's a hard one to keep clean.
Yeah. With that floor.
Any more questions?
I can't see anybody, but somebody shout up. Oh, Thomas Taylor.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. As lead products aren't really favoured for DIY people, I was wondering if there are any suggestions for sort of fillers that are as good as the old-fashioned way.
If you send your email through, I'll give you a list of fillers. I'll send that through to you. There's Saraflex do one. I'll get you a list sent through of possible options on that. I mean, we used to make white lead and red lead powder mixed with white lead paste as a caulking mix, and it was fantastic. But
yeah.
Of course, you know, well, for a start, I think the 5-litre tin, if it had white lead in it, was so heavy the handles were snapping. So we did it in one, I think it was 3 kilo packs, and then we'd sell a little bag of red lead pigment to go with it. I know exactly what you mean. And whereabouts are you based, actually? Are you in Norfolk by any chance? Or?
No, Sussex.
Right. The school in Norfolk used to use it to for training kids to do clinker built boats. Yeah, I'll get you a list sent through of products that we think are the best ones out. Well, there's lots of different ones, but some of them aren't as, they tend to use their flexibility over time, and then you can get a problem with the gaps. You can get a problem. Sorry, what was that?
That was the cat in the background. It's really cute.
Oh, right. Sorry. But yeah, no, if you give us an email address, we'll send you through a couple of mastics that people use. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, I think that is everyone, I think. Well, thank you very, very much for that. I've learnt loads.
I've learned loads, actually. I've learned about copper sulfate thing. That's a good idea. I hadn't heard about that one. So yeah.
No, and it's good to see you all, even though it's virtually. One day it will be again face to face, but at least this way we can all just leave and go to bed. Is it bedtime yet? Anyway, thank you very, very much. Hopefully we'll do another one of these when the time allows and when Teamac have recovered from this one. But if you've got any questions or anything that you've forgotten to ask, just email it through. And I'll make sure that the people who have asked for that extra information, they get it back from Teamac. So I should just say, and I should have said at the beginning, that this has been recorded, just so we can share it with others who weren't available tonight, because they were sailing. So we're not going to send it to them. Painting, doing other stuff. So if you've got any problems with that, just let me know, and I'll make sure that that's dealt with. Okay, that's all. Lovely. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Teamac.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you very much.